welcome to this very special day, the 19th of June 2020. It is an honor and a pleasure for me to welcome you to this gathering. I'm Zoie Lafis, and I join you as a representative of the Center for Hellenic Studies, where I serve as Executive Director, working together with our Faculty Director, Professor Greg Nagy, our Senior Fellows, Laura Slatkin and Richard Martin, and our colleagues, Lana Coley, Ali Marbury, Leah Henhardt, Noel Spencer, among others. At the dawn of this day, and before we begin, the mother of the Muses, Mnemosyne, goddess of memory, claims a moment. As the personification of memory, of remembrance, the goddess calls on us to commemorate a moment. The moment marking the ending of slavery in the United States. The moment when the correction of a huge mistake gets underway on a path that leads to healing. Through many twists and turns, we find ourselves today on that same path, and on this day, we continue with renewed effort and resolve. It is with this resolve that we continue to lead our lives as civic-minded persons, families and friends, as citizens of the earth with its boundless promise of cultivating new garden, an earth in which and through which life began, an earth that is ever ready to sustain life for all. As the breath of this day awakens us, we draw from the guiding lights, the daughters of Mnemosyne, who are the Muses, inviting them to inspire us to fulfill ourselves, to fashion whatever tools that, when used well, will help us bring our best selves forward. Through the disciplines and faculties of these inspiring Muses, we have woven together a fabric for the events today, an ambitious tapestry. We are grateful to each of you who joined us in our weaving this year, all the friends who expressed interest, provided help, guidance, you who send in your contributions to the gardens, you who continue weaving the web of the arts. In friendship, Isadora Duncan helped Angelo Sikelianos and Eva Palmer find the spot for their home in Delphi at the beginning of the 20th century. It is our hope that the friendship of the Center for Hellenic Studies with the Isadora Duncan International Institute and the Ecumenical Delphic Union, through the work of the Committee for the Reinstatement of the Delphic Games, will lead us to find a spot to stand in Delphi, to celebrate a festival in 2021. It is our fond hope that other friends will join us in this path. It is our dearest wish that the three Muses of Askra in Boeotia, as mentioned by Pausanias, are present in this endeavor. Mnemi, to allow memory and awareness towards an innate reverence for the environment, gratitude for the resources that it affords us. Meleti, to aid our study towards peaceful coexistence through cultural understanding and diplomacy. Aidi, to afford us expressive voice that is fully manifested through freedom of creative expression. It is a great honor for me to stand here as I introduce the wondrous friends and teachers that made our gathering possible. Joining us from Boston is Professor Gregory Nagy, Faculty Director of the Center for Hellenic Studies. Joining us from Delphi, Greece, is the Honorable Panayotis Kaltsis, Founder and Director of the Ecumenical Delphic Union, former Mayor of Delphi. And joining us from New York is Dr. Jeanne Bresciani, Artistic Director of the Isadora Duncan International Institute. Welcome.
Hello again.
Dear friends, as my colleague Zoie Lafis has said, my name is Gregory Nagy. I'm a professor at Harvard University, and I am currently faculty director of the Center for Hellenic Studies, where Zoie Lafis is executive director. Our organization is so much more than an organization. It is truly a garden, a garden of the Muses. And my colleague said it so well in such an inspired way. Uh, I think of Zoie not only as a colleague, but as an inspiring muse of the whole garden. And I say garden, not just organization, because one of the things I would like to suggest to you is that what is happening at the Center for Hellenic Studies, and I don't just mean the garden in Washington, DC, I mean also Center for Hellenic Studies in Greece. What this center is a connection of dots, just as Delphi is the ultimate connection of dots. The Pythian festival at Delphi was a situation where everything came together, since Delphi was considered, I would say rightly so, the center of the universe. A center that actually makes it possible for everyone to connect the dots, as it were. And this is where the Muses come into the picture again. And not just the Muses, but the setting for the Muses, such as the indescribable setting of Delphi, so indescribable that words of poets fail them. I think of that French thinker, Gaston Bachelard, who talked about the poetics of space, la poétique de l'espace. And surely that is what Delphi is, as a reality, but also as an ideal. And it's the setting not only for Apollo, who is singing and dancing, and may I put it this way, arranging the choreography for the Muses. It's the Muses themselves. And without the Muses, there is no Apollo. I have to emphasize that because sometimes when we think of Delphi, we think of Apollo only and we forget the Muses. I'm so glad that my dear colleague Zoie mentioned the Muses not only as they appear in Hesiodic poetry in the Theogony, where we hear of 9 Muses who sing and dance on the peak of Mount Helicon, and then proceed to come down from the peaks singing and dancing until they meet Hesiod and inspire him on his poetic mission to tell about them so that they can tell us about everything. Zoie mentioned the 3 names of the Muses as they are worshipped in the locale where Hesiod is the native son, Askra. And she pronounced it so beautifully in modern Greek, the way it should be pronounced now. Let me repeat, but this time try to use the sound system that was in effect back in the days of Hesiodic poetry, or for that matter, back in the classical period of ancient Greece. So how did Zoie say it? I had better get my mnemonics, my memory right about this. And it's easy with the first one. Her name is Mneme, or in modern Greek, Mnimi, which means memory. And how appropriate that she's the first of the 3 Muses as they are worshipped in the locale of Askra, where Hesiod himself, a prototype for singing and dancing, is the model. So number 1, Mneme, memory. Remember that her mother and the mother of all the Muses is Mnemosine, pronounced in modern Greek Mnemosini, which also means memory in a more exalted way. Let me quickly get to the second of the 3 Muses that my colleague mentioned, Melete, Meleti in modern Greek, which means practice, in the sense of practice makes perfect. And then, this is the best part, The third of a trio of three muses would be called aoide, or in modern Greek, aidi, which means song. That is to say, you have to mentally conceptualize what the song is. You have to remember it, but remembering is simply mentally connecting to everything in the universe. It doesn't have to do only with the past. It's also with the present and even the future. So may I say, instead of memory, how about mental connectedness? So you have to be mentally connected, but then you have to practice. Practice makes perfect. Rehearsals, meleti. So that's muse number two. And then muse number three is just song. It's the execution. Without the execution, which is song, which is performance, which is, as we'll see soon in our program, a matter of not just reciting poetry, it's singing poetry, and it gets better than that. It's dancing poetry. Milton had it right when he resisted the idea of talking about poetry only. You can't just talk about poetry only, you have to talk about singing, and singing has to include dancing. And by dancing, I don't just mean fancy footwork, which is sometimes the facile way of thinking about dance in our modern world. I think of it as visualized by Isadora Duncan and as visualized by my dear colleague, Jeanne Bresciani. It's an organic thing. It's an organic thing where song and dance go together so much that in ancient Greek, you can't even separate them. I think of the verb merpo, sometimes merpomai, in modern Greek, pronounced the same way, practically, merpo, merpomi, merpome. And merpo means I sing and I dance simultaneously. You can't separate the two. And when I say dance, I mean any kind of motor activity. Oh, I did not say that in a very poetic way, did I? By motor activity, I mean anything that involves the movement of the body, where the body is not static, where the body comes alive. That is what dance is. It is part of singing. It cannot be separated from singing, even if the words aren't there. The words are still somewhere waiting to come alive. You notice that I keep saying that singing and dancing are organic, that you can't separate them. I guess I'm so convinced about this principle, not only because I love to read Milton, but also because I was trained as a linguist. My first love, I must confess to you, was linguistics. And in linguistics, it's very clear that you cannot talk about meter, you cannot talk about rhythm, you cannot talk about anything that goes into the making of song and poetry without talking about the motor ability of the human body to produce sound and how the human body produces sound and vision at the same time. It's all very organic. So how am I going to loop back to the Muses and the driving idea that I have in my mind, in my consciousness, in my mental connectedness of being connected mentally with the world of the Muses, and how the Muses are mental connectedness, so connectedness of the heart. Well, here's the way I think I would like to do it. I mentioned the great poet figure Hesiod. Now I'll mention somebody who eclipses Hesiod in our mind, and that's Homer. And in Homeric poetry, the culture hero of the Iliad at one point invokes the Muses and says, "You must help me now, Muses. You must tell me everything that happened." Why? Because you were there. You saw everything and you heard everything. I, the poet, Homer, know nothing without you. In other words, if it weren't for the fact that the Muses, whom I like to describe sometimes as the goddesses of total recall, if those Muses had not been there in the heroic age and witnessed the interactions of gods and heroes, how they lived, how the heroes died while the gods kept living on and on, all of that would not be possible in the medium of the Muses if the Muses themselves had not been there then and if they weren't there now. So, about their organic nature, here is where I'd like to bring in something else. You saw my colleague framed within the beautiful space of a garden. And it's through the inspiration of colleagues like Zoie and all the other beautiful, wonderful people who work for the Center for Hellenic Studies that I can justly think of the center as a garden of the Muses. And here I draw as an inspiration of my own, maybe it's too academic, but here it comes, the Library of Alexandria. And I love the fact that Alexandria and its library, which preserves what we think of as the totality of Western civilization, is located in the continent of Africa, just as the rival library, the Library of Pergamon, is located in Asia, let's say Asia Minor. So when I'm talking about Europe or Western, I think much more globally thanks to the Muses. Now, in the case of the Library of Alexandria, it's very clear from the eyewitness account of the great geographer Strabo, who flourished between the 1st century before our era and the 1st century of our era. When Strabo visits the library, what does he see? He sees a garden, and he sees the garden enclosed by a portico, and the portico has a covered roof, and it wraps, the way I like to imagine it, all around the garden. And inside the portico are the pigeonholes. I like to think of them that way, not as shelves, where the scrolls containing, may I put it this way, all of European literature as the Hellenes, the Greeks understood it, is not just stored, but preserved, ready for activation. And here's where things get really organic. The founder of the Library of Alexandria, Alexander the Great, had a vision, you see. He wanted to fuse the traditions of Europe, or let's call them the traditions of the Hellenes, with the traditions of other cultures of the world, as represented, for example, by Egyptian civilization. In Egyptian civilization, the idea of the body is dependent on the idea of how the body must come back to life. So when the Greeks, who became partners in civilization with the Egyptian during the era of the Ptolemies, when the Greeks, inspired by the achievements of Alexander the Great, founded the Library of Alexandria, you know what they called it? The soma, the body. And sometimes soma, body, is misunderstood to mean the body of Alexander the Great. After all, he was mummified there, perfect synthesis of Egyptian and Greek religion, as we would call it today, in the sense that for Alexander as a European, he wanted to be a hero of cult, a cult hero who is worshipped for his achievements. But as the Egyptian pharaoh, which he also became, as the Kosmokrator, as the ruler of the cosmos, which was the Greek way of translating the Egyptian concept of the pharaoh as the ruler of the cosmos, ruler of the universe, he wanted his body to be mummified, which in terms of Egyptian religion means that in the fullness of time, this body will come back to life and achieve eternity. will be recycled into eternity. So also, just when you take out of a pigeonhole at the Library of Alexandria a scroll, what do you find inside? Letters. But the letters, even if they're dead, if they're just sitting there, can be activated when you read them. And when you read them, the letters come alive just as the body comes alive. And for us, the coming to life of the body can best be visualized as dance, as the aspect of song where the body, first static, suddenly gets animated. It starts moving. And with the motion comes a new lease on life. It's a revivification, a coming back to life. It's making sure that letters don't say dead, that they come alive. That's what the Library of Alexandria was like. And that is, in my mind, what the garden of the Center for Hellenic Studies, which we can view ideally. There's a garden in Washington, D.C., but there's also a garden in Nafplio in Greece, and there is maybe the ultimate garden of them all, which is landscaped by nature itself, Delphi, the abode of Apollo, who is there presiding over this world of song and dance through the mediation of the Muses. And I think this is the occasion where I can make a transition. I could talk to you forever about how excited I am about the inspiration of the Center for Hellenic Studies as a garden. And all the gardeners, all the ones like my colleague Zoie Lafis, who cultivate the garden, or as we read in the Candide of Voltaire, we must cultivate our garden. And so I start with the Center of Hellenic Studies, and I give tribute not only to Zoie, but to my dear wife, who I still remember when I was appointed director of the Center for Hellenic Studies, the faculty director, partnering with the executive director, who is my dear colleague, Zoie. Holly said to me and to Zoie, hey, let's make this a garden. And that's what we did. And now, as I give the word, and I mean word in the total sense of logos, word, to my dear colleague, Panayotis Kaltsis, I can't resist but offer just one set of words of praise. I can't sing, I can't dance, but let me present this to you, my dear new friend, Panos, as a kind of academic song of praise. To me, dear new friend, you are the exemplification of the Greek ideal of native son. You're the native son of Delphi, and you bring to life the spirit of Apollo and his muses, who in turn activate the spirit of song and dance. And without dance, there can't be motion, and there cannot be the bringing back to life. That said, please, my dear colleague, take the word.
Thank you, dear Greg. We will be with Panos in one moment, with Mr. Kaltsis, one moment.
Yes. Okay. So my name is Panos Kaltsis. I live in Delphi, but I feel I came here 13,000 years ago. Today, you will permit me, is it waiting you here, I receive a message from the Garden of Eagles. Angelos Sikelianos, the poet of Delphi, and the poet who tried to revive the Delphic ideal, the Delphic games, traveled to another world today, like today, 69 years ago, June 19th. And from Delphi to the world, I offer into your garden a branch of Apollo laurel and a branch of olive tree for peace in the world. You know, Professor, there are 147 reasons why somebody has to come to Delphi. And why? People are trying to find the happiness. They're running every day after the advertising and so and so and so. But coming to Delphi, you need only 2 steps to find the path of happiness: to know thyself and everything in moderation. So, as I said, there are 147 reasons, as many as the Delphic maxims, but only 2 are enough to find this path. So, I'll be glad to continue after my little video. Zoe is okay? Hannah?
Perfect. Thank you, Panos. Thank you. Perfect. Thank you, Panos. Thank you.
And so changed our lives.
So culture, peace, and environment is the message for the Delphic games of modern era. I will explain you from the back. The last piece you heard was from Vangelis, the Papathanasiou, and his offer to the Delphic movement through this music piece in Delphi. The before one, you know, during the classic period, a slave to become free, it was enough to come to Delphi and write his name in polygonic wall at the Temple of Apollo. And he was, after that, he was slave of the god and free, no slave to anyone. So early this century, with United Nations, we make a meeting at the ancient stadium to give an award to Mikis Theodorakis, and we invite this beautiful lady who sang Jocelyn Smith. And this Light Me is so up to date. For us, it was a great honor to have this lady here and sing. Before you saw 4 pictures, the most important is the first one, at the ancient theater, where Troades is the Greek name, my dear professor, Troades, the Trojan women. What was the unique with this one? You know, the poet Euripides wrote the Troades. He was a Hellenas. He was a Greek Hellenas. And he wrote how the women of Troya fell up after the war. But this time, Theodoros Torzopoulos, what he did, the actors of the player was from Hellas, from Cyprus, from Syria, from Turkey, from Serbia. He was showing the problem in the area and that people like to live in peace. So we are not now in your garden, in your beautiful garden there. Why? Because the pandemic. But pandemic was the reason to upgrade the Olympic Games. You know, Apollo, god of medicine, of light, of prophetise, of music, we call him Anthropinos Theos. Anthropinos Theos. Anthropos. So he advised with a oracle to king of Elis, Iphitos. That period, Greece has another pandemic, but this pandemic came after wars. So he advised with an oracle to Iphitos to upgrade the Olympic Games, so people to have feelings and ideas for something better. And Olympic Games were on. That was after a pandemic. Now we have a pandemic. What happens if tomorrow we have a pandemic after a war? It's very, very, it's the necessary of our days to keep the peace in the world. Because with the new technical of the world, if we have a war and pandemic, maybe it will be the end of the life on this planet. That's why our trilogy is the culture, peace, and environment. And also, we know very well the last 50 years, the higher education left little the classics and went to technology. We have to keep a balance. Another proposal that the Delphic Union is doing is the academic Pythia, academic Delphic Games. What means that? A week of classic civilization, a free week of classic civilization to the universities. Why? In the future, so why? The youths to receive knowledge for leadership with humanism. So tomorrow leaders to have knowledge for humanism. I am I'm dreaming a movement of whole Delphi citizens for peace, culture, and humanity. And with this thinking, you are members of this movement, and I will be very, very happy to welcome you here in Delphi next year. Zoe. Zoe, μπορείς να ακούσω?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, dear Panos. Thank you very much. This is wonderful to see the scene. Thank you for your message from Delphi, Greece, and to see the wonderful work of the Ecumenical Delphic Union. So much wonderful activity there in so many facets that really contributes to our civilization today. And we truly are just so honored to have you among us, to be able to know more about that. And we just hope to continue this work together as time comes and in procession. We would
Dear Zoe, that we are all together. As I told you, like today, Angelos Xikelianos fly to the garden of flowers. And we have many, and there with Eva Palmer from Gramercy Park, and with their relative Isadora Duncan, they're together. But they have all come and moved in Delphi when 1 century ago. So we have, I make an appeal, a Delphic appeal for humanitarians all over the world. And most important, as Apollo, the god of music, I make an appeal to all musicians, to all countries, America, Europe, Asia, to make a music movement for peace and environment is the necessity of our days.
Thank you, Panos. I'm also I was so happy today to hear just through the voice of Joycelyn Smith. The voice. I was so happy to hear the poem "The Arnises" of George Seferis, and we know that from your stories, he was a frequent visitor in Delphi.
You know, Zoe, Giorgos Seferiadis was a friend of my father, and he was on 50s. He was staying in our house. Later became Seferis. So I have the great honority to have met our poet, our noble poet, and we continue, Xikelianos, Seferis.
Yes. Beautiful, and this is how we feel, Panos. We feel that Delphi continues to be a place that welcomes poets and that and welcomes that work and that a piece of that. And I think hope it's inspiring to all. And I'm so glad that we are sharing that with our friends gathered here today.
Dear Greg, all professors are Delphians. All professors are humanitarian professors are Delphians. So we'll look forward to welcome you here, if not tomorrow, next year.
My dear friend, could I add to that, you as the native son of Delphi make this gesture all the more beautiful, and my screen fell because I'm so excited about what you said to me, but now I've recovered from the fall. Could I also say that we have a saying at the Center for Hellenic Studies in Washington, D.C. We like to say we are all librarians, because the ideals of the Library of Alexandria are such that, in a sense, all study has to be grounded in the art of the Muses and the Garden of the Muses. And therefore, if the Library of Alexandria was a a beautiful garden as well as a library, not like the later kinds of library in the later world where it was brick buildings, but a real garden. Then I think you're so right, my dear friend Panos. It's not just that we're all humanists, we're all librarians because we all belong to the Garden of the Muses. And I'm so glad that you used the wonderful evocative words of Sikelianos. In a sense, wasn't Voltaire right when he ended that masterpiece of his by saying, we must cultivate our garden?
So, dear Professor, two answers. First, I'll be very proud when we welcome you next year here, when you hear the myths for the flowers of Delphi. You will be really surprised if you hear these myths. Second, in our day, you know, the burn of Alexandria brought humanity to darkness. Now, in some way, some people around the world are trying to burn again. That's why I'm uniting my voice with you, with what I say, what I used to say, whole Delphi citizens for peace and environment.
It's so true. Is the same civilization, the same polythismos that, may I put it this way, pioneered democracy, also pioneered environmentalism. I think of the oath of the Ephebes, the Ephevi, where the obligation of every new generation is to leave the environment in even better state of health than the way they found it. In our troubled world today, those Greek ideals, to my mind, come together so beautifully in Delphi. Delphi is the place where, in a sense, all disagreements can be, shall we say, adjusted and integrated in a new kind of humanism. So I am deeply honored by your kind words, and my colleague Zoie, as executive director of the Center for Hellenic Studies, who's not only a great gardener and a great music person in the sense of a devotee of the Muses, but also a great organizer. May I even say a great, how shall I call it? I can't say organizer in.
Οικοδέσποινα.
Okay, perfect.
Οικοδέσποινα.
Akribos, Aftoina.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yes. And I must say, the wonderful friend that we have to thank for bringing us together, Panos, Kaltsis, and Greg Nagy, is our dear Jeanne Bresciani,
Yes.
who will join us. We'll be seeing her in just a few moments. And but I just wanted to thank her because truly she has been a frequent visitor in Delphi, and her friendship with Panos made it possible for us to kind of come together here today, and certainly meet here today. And so I think that for now we will close this session, and we will soon now be joined by our dear Jeanne Bresciani of the Isadora Duncan International Institute.
Good morning. I am Jeanne Bresciani, and I am with you in this Delphic spirit today from Tempio di Danza, the mother house of the Isadora Duncan International Institute, situated directly on the granite foundation of the Shawangunk Ridge, believed to be the oldest rock formation on the earth. In the beautiful mountainous area of the Hudson Valley in New York, Together we are en route to Delphi and the Delphic Games, where sunlight strums the lyre. We have begun our journey toward the sacred way, near the breathing spaces that lay between the gleaming Phaedrides and the Pleistos Gorge, those upper and lower worlds, transcendent and chthonic, to light the Delphic flame, to rediscover archetypal presences and artistic impulses, preternatural and refined, to meet Apollo, Dionysus, the Maenads, the Muses, on the terrain of the ancient Pythia herself, seeking to sanctify all of our music and our dances as Plato would have it, to find beauty in that enchanted gasp for air and the clarity that bears the Delphic aesthetis. We approach the temple of Apollo to ask the question and to answer in deeds the soul-bending riddles at the place where philosophy began in wonderment, where too our ancestors traveled far for wisdom and illumination, and to know the topos on which to stand in search of a right rhythm for existence, that we might seek to merge art to sport and all to life in contests, great, small, and enduring, envisioning and crafting of the mythopoetic plane, one's individual myth, while that of our culture as well, to open a new chapter in the book of the Muses, that original tome in which the sum of all learning resides. We come also to return Isadora to the dancing grounds of Parnassus, for it was she who chose the site, not long before her death, for a Delphic Games festival house as base for preparations on behalf of the first reinstatement in modern time. She, whose father, a poet, had prophetically proclaimed during her childhood that Greece will be living Greece once more. Did he know in oracular voice of her crucial role then and always for the dream that was Hellas's Delphi? She had heard the clear call of divinity to create a language of the soul from her earliest years, as in seeking the source of spiritual expression that would flow through the channels of the body, that body knowingly made up of all the elements of nature, to reveal nature's great secret rules in a divine continuity, giving to all of nature its beauty and its life. In studying the antique and its treasury in myth, theater, art, and ideas, her fervent wish was to steep myself in the spirit underlying them, in order to discover the secret of the ecstasy in them, putting myself into touch with the feelings that their gestures symbolized, and in taking my soul back to the mystic sources of their rapture. I have found again, she continues, the secret of beauty, neither Greek nor antique, but the spontaneous expression of my soul lifted up by beauty. She sought to bring to life the ancient ideal, not by copying or imitating, but by breathing its life and recreating it in oneself. Isadora knew well Plato's dictum, the dance. Of all the arts is the one that most influences the soul. Dancing is divine, and its nature is the gift of gods. Acknowledging this, she accepted the mandate to change form and character according to the decree of the immortal gods. And in these forces that she received inwardly before giving them outwardly, so was her art born, not simply a school of dance, but a school of life, a school to unite anew the arts and the artists, beseeching them to accomplish this miracle of love, and a school to express what is the most moral, healthful, and beautiful in art, stating, "This is the mission of the dancer, and to this I dedicate my life." Soon we arrive in Tanagra Procession, on paths where truths step up to paradigms of experience, calibrated in a measure that is human. 5 gestural motifs occur repeatedly, shifting in stances fueled by emotion into motion. From the namesake figurines of old that Isadora studied in museums, she brings to life statements on selfhood, personhood to be shared. She summons up attention, intention, direction, and awareness for action to, toward, and with the natural and the other for a sense of the beautiful. Herein we trace the ars viva, the art of life, and make of it a sensory map of the world for being and becoming increasingly human, building newborn dignity and human values to grow in scale, dimension, intensity, and quality. To right, to left, in detail, in wholeness. For art and for life's sake, we are brought a testament to foundation, expression, crystallization, revelation, the earth's grounding, the sleep and dream of the underworld, the divine's beneficent reaches. For Aristotle, the use of art is to frame the ordinary into the extraordinary. And in Tanagra 1, there is the framing of identity and the staking of a claim for autos, the self. So that as Rumi has stated, wherever one stands, one is the soul of that place. The Greeks defined barriers and boundaries, giving order and meaning to both sacred and profane. Thus in Tanagra 2, without delay, we meet strife, the father of all, within the foundry of the body and the soul, in the agon, the struggle, the contest. That which moves us by means of the greater tension to the greater potential. While to lyric exaltation, the eternal and divine point of view, in Tanagra 3, moves Pteron, the wing, in flight, to craft a soul in flight, for many a message is received in the air in order to produce the sublime. In Isadora's dance, each pose, each posture is a declaration on the possible for the movement of the universe concentrated in an individual, and nowhere more perceptibly than in the lying down and rising do we sight the apparition of her motion into stillness and the miracle of her stillness into motion. Until, in Tanagra 4, the kindling of desire for what surrounds is visited upon the dancer like an angel of annunciation unto a mortal. And we surmise once again that all is right with the world in the act of glaukopis, the all-seeing vision. When beauty itself stuns, in Tanagra 5, rich garments adorn to fall, and we touch the place of the beautiful, the telos, or risk never being touched at all, to partake of the beautiful, that we too might become imagination without end, only to step farther and to reach back more than ever to the reserves of Athena Pronoia in her triumph of the human spirit, where pain, illness, and loss are her labors and witnesses to the living mystery, and where meaning is wrested from the primordial fire to become again the Delphic flame. And now May this Delphic Preview begin with gratitude to our prime movers in Delphi, in Athens, in Washington, and to the vast number of our contributors living and working for the Delphic ideal in artistic and scholarly alliance as ambassadors of concord, accord, and harmony, with all of our thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, dearest Jeanne. Thank you for all the dancers of the Isadora Duncan International Institute. This has been just so marvelous, so wonderful. The chords are in motion. Thank you so much. I think we are about to conclude our this opening ceremonies at this point. Thank you all very much for being here. We will resume shortly, closer to 11 o'clock with our next session, performing Pindar. In the meantime, just any concluding words? Greg, Panos, I think we need you back on camera. Let's see. Okay, Panos will join us shortly. Dear Greg?
Well, I am speechless. This was a beautiful presentation, and it brings to life everything that we were talking about through motion. So I am overwhelmed.
Thank you, dear Greg. Thank you so much, Panos, Mr. Kaltsis. Dear Jeanne, thank you so much for being with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, thank you for being here. Welcome to the 2020 Festival of the Muses. We will continue, as I said, shortly. Just stay tuned. We will continue at 11 a.m. Eastern Time with the session performing Pindar. Until then.
Until then, thank you.
Until then, till we meet again.
Okay, thank you.